So, to actually find that story where Jesus restores Peter to himself, it's actually in the precious book of John. So, if you turn to John chapter 21, verse 15, it says, So when they'd eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, listen. The names are so important, y'all. I'm serious. Look, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? Well, who do you think of when it says Jonah? A prophet of God who fled when it came down to doing what God asked him to do and be strong. He ran as fast as he could, but God had to help him along through that rebellion, didn't he? To accomplish his will. He sure did. So listen, you son of rebelliousness. No, that's just what I saw. Okay, but Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? And he said, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, Feed my lambs. And he said a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, are you listening, you son of rebellion? Do you love me? And he said to him, Yes, Lord, you know I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah. You know, if he's saying it three times, you need to hear, you need to listen up. And he said his name, Simon, son of Jonah, three times. Do you love me? And Peter was grieved. And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. Well, then feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. Remember I mentioned, it doesn't say he was adorned or dressed, like he dressed himself. That linen cloth was thrown over his nakedness. Isn't that interesting? That covering was placed there, but he fled. And then he was naked because he no longer had that covering. But when you were younger, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. And when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. And I know we think about when we get old, someone else is going to dress us, but I think there's a deeper meaning here. I think he's telling him, when you were young, when you were in your rebellion, you dressed yourself in your own righteousness. You thought fighting and cutting off ears and, fight to the death, that kind of rebellion, that's how you dressed yourself. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands and another will gird you. I will clothe you in righteousness and carry you where you don't wish to go. Your flesh doesn't wish that kind of suffering or persecution or this trial or the hard things that we must go through as God purifies us, but he takes us there. If we're willing, right? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he'd spoken this, he said to him, Follow me. So when I'm looking at this story of this fling of the man naked in Mark, I'm really thinking it is about us, but I really think it's pointing out the story of Peter, because that story is one we really need to take hold of. Also in the book of John, it really stresses the importance of watching. And this is in chapter 21. Take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and that day come upon you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare to all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch, therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. See, Jesus was calling them in the garden to watch and pray. Stand, watch, and pray. And instead of standing with the Son of Man there, standing before him, they fled. They all fled. So I do see this young man who flees naked, though he's not named. We know he follows him. He follows Christ. And just as the one who wasn't named, who took out his sword and struck the servant, cut off his ear, this one left the linen cloth and fled naked. And the next thing that happened is he did succumb to temptation. He did deny Christ. He did leave him and have to be restored. So my question in all of this, of what my understanding in this story is to ask myself, am I clothing myself Am I covering myself, or is the Lord covering me? And as I'm covered in him, I'm not scot-free. I need to listen to him as I follow. Listen, Simon. Watch and pray that you don't fall into temptation. Satan's asked for you. He's going to sift you like wheat. You are going to be tested.